Afternoon, everybody, and welcome to this month's edition of the Alabama Workers' Rights Training. My name is Larry Hodge. I'm Community Engagement Coordinator for Jobs to Move America. And this month's training is going to be on heat stress. We decided to facilitate this particular training because it's coming up on that time of year that, for those of us who might have a job on the outside, outdoors, is going to be really important to make sure that you are able to recognize the hazards, that you're able to protect yourself from heat illness. And those of the people who work on the inside, although their temperatures might not change very much, sorry, I should have taken care of that prior. Although the temperatures in some instances might not change very much, it's important to note that it doesn't have to be excruciatingly hot for you to become ill from heat stress and heat illness. So we wanted to bring this training again, as I said, because each year that I worked in the field, we were trained on heat stress and heat illnesses whenever that season came around, because it's important that, it's fresh in your mind so you can better be able to protect yourself. And we're going to get right into it. Again, I'm Larry Hodge, and I want to remind you that this training is brought to you in partnership by the Alabama Coalition for Community Benefits. Now, the Alabama Coalition for Community Benefits, we are a coalition of organizations, civil rights groups, faith leaders, environmental groups, social justice organizations, and just a number of other organizations and people who have joined together in order to advocate for social and economic justice, and especially for workers and marginalized communities. And part of that coalition consists of the National Black Worker Center Project. There's also American Federation of Labor, Congress of Industrial Organizations, or the AFL-CIO, Adelante, Alabama Worker Center, Jobs to Move America, of course, and A Better Balance. And from A Better Balance today, joining us is going to be not Cameron Dawson. I say it every time because Cameron was on with us so many times. It's going to be Lauren Booth. She's a staff attorney for A Better Balance. And Lauren is going to be able to tell you more about how to enforce your rights and explain your rights under the law to a safe workplace, and also the employer's responsibility to provide a safe and healthful workplace. Alabama Workers' Rights Training, we bring these every month because we know that you deserve better. No one should have to be injured or killed for a paycheck. And again, if you think your job is unsafe, you can call OSHA, or better yet, contact us, and some of that contact information is going to be provided to you before the end of this webinar. Our today's agenda is going to be welcome and introduction, scope of training, protecting yourself from heat-related illness. We have a case study and your rights to a safe workplace and workplace accommodations, closing remarks, and thank you. And I'm not sure, Charles Crooms is also joining me as usual. Charles is going to be the one that gives us a enforcement, not enforcement, but Charles is going to do advocacy piece. And Charles is the lead organizer for Jobs to Move America, as well as our co-facilitator of these meetings every month. And I want to make sure that I recognize Charles, as I skipped over him earlier. Now, the scope of this training, purpose of this training is to familiarize you with what is heat stress and how it occurs and what to do about it if you find that you are a coworker suffering from any type of heat-related illness. And in this training model, we're going to learn first and foremost how to protect you and your coworkers and what to do in case a person is suffering from a heat-related illness. You'll learn too that it's not important to try to differentiate whether or not it's heat exhaustion, heat stress, or heat stroke, because they all can occur at the same time, and they can increase and worsen very rapidly. So anytime a person exhibits any symptoms of heat exhaustion or heat stress, any it's any heat illness whatsoever, it is time then to start first aid on that individual. And by the end of this training, we hope you will be able to, number one, recognize the risk factors of heat illness, recognize symptoms of heat illness and heat stroke, heat exhaustion and heat stroke, how to prevent heat illness, and how to protect you and your coworkers. Very important. And very important is what to do if you or a coworker is ill from any type heat-related illness. Now, exposure to heat can cause illness and death even for anyone. Now, the most serious illness is heat stroke, and that's the one that can be fatal. The others, again, it's not important that we are able to identify what they are, such as heat exhaustion, heat cramps, and heat rash. Is not really that important. Anytime you are presented with any of these symptoms, it's time to start first aid. Now, there are precautions that can be taken anytime temperatures are high and the job involves physical work. And that's what we're going to spend some time on today and make sure that you understand that. One of the things that I want to stress is that it's very important to make sure that you're not be overcome by heat illness or heat stroke, because once the body overheats and like that, and I can tell you from personal experience that once you suffer a real severe heat illness episode, you'll never be able to reach that temperature again, and it makes you just that much more susceptible to heat-related illness. One of the things that we need to always consider, and that is personal risk factors. Always consider your specific task and take precaution to protect yourself. Now, some of the risk factors in high temperatures and humidity, direct sun exposure, no breeze or wind, that's really important. And remember that it doesn't have to be excruciatingly hot for these things to start to take effect on the body. Another thing is heavy physical labor. Anytime your body, the temperatures are high and you're having to exert your body and do heavy physical labor, you run the risk of overheating and having a heat illness episode. Another thing is no recent exposure, or what we call your body not being acclimated to heat. And it happens this time of year, especially when it's not really extremely hot, but you're in a stress, in a strenuous situation where you're having to exert a lot of physical energy, but it's just hard enough because your body has not been acclimated. It's not used to that type of heat. And that's when it really, really can take effect on you and take toll on you really quickly. Another one is low liquid intake. As a rule, we were taught to hydrate before, during, and after the activity. And that goes the same even for people who are working out. I can tell you that in the environment that I worked in, it was really important because it was extremely hot. But that's mine. That's what I know. But I want you to understand that you are the professionals, you are the experts in the environment that you work in. And you know how hot that temperatures might get in there. And it's very important that you know exactly when your body starts to tell you that you are suffering from some type of heat illness. Another one, waterproof clothing. A lot of people, and some of the people on here now are familiar with Tyvek suits, for instance. These are those protective suits that you have to wear. And what happens is that they don't allow any circulation. So your body can't receive air and circulation in order to cool it off. So those are some of the things that will really, really take its toll on you really quickly. Another is working with or near certain machinery. Again, the environment that I come from, there were boilers, there were, when I worked in the manufacturing industry, there were furnaces and all these things that it exude a tremendous heat. Again, you know your environment better than anyone does. So make sure that you are aware of that and take the proper precautions as well. Performing certain tasks such as welding or burning or working in a foundry like I'm talking about in the manufacturing sector. So that is another thing we have to make sure that we are always mindful of the different situations that we work and conditions that we work under. Now, some of the symptoms of heat exhaustion, and again, it's really important that we not try to determine what symptom you are suffering from at a particular time. It's just important that you can identify some of the things leading up to it. So heat can cause headache, dizziness, or fainting whenever anyone is exhibiting weakness and wet skin, irritability and confusion, thirst, nausea, or vomiting. You know that that individual is has overheated and they should have been out of the heat long before this happened, you know. So that's why it's important to recognize this, but not spend too much time trying to diagnose it simply because you think it's simply heat exhaustion at that point, because it can quickly change and get worse. Now, how to recognize heat-related illness again. So again, heat stroke is not that important that you can name it. Once you start to experience any of these, confusion, slurred speech, unconsciousness, of course, we know that that individual has really overheated and should have been receiving medical attention. Seizures, heavy sweating, or hot, dry skin. That was one of the things that we were always taught, is that when you're sweating, you're doing exactly what the body was designed to do. But once you stop sweating and you become clammy and just hot and dry, that is a certain indicator that you have really overheated and you should be getting some medical attention. Very high body temperature is another one, and rapid heart rate. Fatigue. This will be experienced early on. So these are the initial symptoms that you'll know, and it's time to start really at that point to take a break and cool down and get fluids in. Irritability, thirst, nausea, vomiting, dizziness and lightheadedness, heavy sweating, and elevated body temperatures. All of these things are indicators that the body is letting you know that it is getting too hot and that you really do need to heed that moment, that warning signs, and do what's necessary to lower your body temperature. This one I always have a problem pronouncing, rhabdomyolysis. And it's important I left it in here because I've been on jobs where you're really hot and you go to the bathroom and your urine is really, really dark. That's a clear indicator that you need to be hydrated. You are really, in fact, one of the trainings we had, there was a chart of your urine can actually indicate how hydrated you are, which indicates, you know, how susceptible you are to heat-related illness. And so the darker it would become, the more severe that heat illness is at that point. Another one is muscle pain and weakness. So these are very important. Now, to prevent heat illness, number one, you need to learn the warning signs of heat illness. And that's what we were just saying. It's not that important that you cannot, you know, differentiate heat illness, heat exhaustion, and heat stroke. Learn the warning signs of any heat-related illness, okay? And be sure that you or your coworkers have the proper training. That is one of the things that Lauren is going to be able to, is going to discuss with you, the employer's responsibilities. Okay, and you've heard me say it a couple of times here, even since this webinar began. we were trained, the employer has a responsibility to offer you training and to provide training for you in any situation or any topic or safety topic that might be a hazard, safety hazard that might affect you. So you have a right to be trained. Make sure that you or your coworkers have a lot of cool water close to the work area. And that's very important. It does you no good actually to have water when you're coming out of a heat stress situation where you're already fatigued and tired and hot, and then you have to travel to get it. So at least you need to have water that's really close to the area that you're working in. And it's been recommended that you have at least 1 pint of water an hour, and that can change for individuals. I know that personally I sweat a lot, so I drink water quite a bit. And it's also important, and a lot of people need to have electrolyte replacement, because as you sweat, your body loses it, and that's not good. You will need to modify your work schedule if possible, and take frequent rest periods with water and breaks in the shade. We had a case study that we did in one of the earlier trainings where the individual came down from the roof he was working on, and he sat in the sun after he felt heat-related illness. And they left him there, and when they came back, he was in such bad shape, they transported him to the hospital, and he later passed away. But one of the things you want to make sure that you have rest breaks in cool or shaded areas, air conditioned if possible, but that's not always possible, and we understand that. But you need to also think about and consider gradually increasing the workload. If you haven't been active in a while, it's really important that you don't just go in with full steam ahead, because that can just drain you and make you more susceptible to heat-related illness and really quickly, actually. And it's important that you be able to recognize the warning signs and do what's necessary. Now, to prevent heat illness, you need to also, again, gradually increase your workload. And workers who are not acclimated to the heat, again, should take more frequent breaks. And that's one of the things in the areas that we run into, situations on the job where people are fearful or afraid to take the necessary breaks in order to make sure that they're not overworking them, overdoing it. And that's something that we need to make sure that we're aware of, and don't be afraid. You can tell anyone when you're too hot, but no one can look at you and tell you that you're not. This is for sure. You need to also wear loose-fitting clothing when you're in these situations and in these environments. And I was always taught that you should wear lighter color clothing as well. You also designate a responsible person to monitor conditions in workers. We called it a competent person on the job, someone who has taken the training, someone who has the experience and knows how to recognize, has the awareness and to recognize when a person is going into a heat illness, and also know what to do in order to help that individual. That's very important. Personal risk factors. Personal risk factors they play a huge role in heat illness. So not everyone will react the same to heat. And for instance, I have high blood pressure and I take medication. So there's some things that I need to be recognizing, and changes in my body that another person may not experience. So it's very important that we understand our personal risk factors. Now, some of them would be certain medical conditions, like I said, those are pregnant, lack of physical fitness, previous episodes of heat illness, that's a huge one. Alcohol consumption, drugs, and the use of certain medications. So Yeah, if you're pregnant, for instance, now although employers have a general duty or responsibility to protect all workers from known hazards, being pregnant may cause you to be more susceptible to a range of serious workplace hazards and conditions that other people won't experience. In fact, studies from Harvard School of Public Health, they looked at 32 million births in the US in the year 2020. And that study shown that exposure to increasing heat may have led to premature birth and low birth weight in babies. And so not only does it affect the mother, it also can affect the unborn child. So that is really, really important that you know to take care of yourself. And Lauren is going to have more information on protections for pregnant people in the workplace as well. Now, also certain medical illnesses, lack of physical fitness, and all of that play a huge part. We know that proper hydration, taking frequent rest breaks, and cool down, and being mindful of your physical activity is also really important. First aid, what to do when a person is suffering from heat-related illnesses. Now, we know that heat-related illnesses can affect workers. Some of the symptoms are non-specific, and that means that when a worker is performing physical labor in a warm environment, any unusual symptom can be a sign of overheating. Any unusual symptom, again, let's not try to get caught up and find out what it is. When in doubt, cool that worker down and call 911, or if you're in a facility where they have safety people on the job and nurses stations and such, get that person to those areas immediately. Heat-related illness and first aid. Now, employees and workers should become familiar with the symptoms of heat illness. And whenever any of the symptoms that we've talked about today are present, don't try to diagnose it again. Make sure that you get them some prompt first aid treatment. And that's because diagnosis can be difficult, and symptoms they can suffer from multiple symptoms at the same time. And it can also escalate and just get so much worse so very quickly. In the next slides, we're going to do an actual case study from OSHA. And this case study is about a foundry worker. And after the slide and the case study is talked about, we're going to look at some of the things that lessons learned from this incident. So we had a 35-year-old man who had worked at a foundry for 6 years. Now, the indoor workplace had high levels of environmental heat, so it was always surrounded by heat, as it is in the foundry, because of the molten metal that you're working with. But his normal job was in a much cooler area of the building. But on this specific day that this incident occurred, they asked him to go and work in another area, part of the building, which was closer to the oven. And he had to wear this heavy protective clothing. And I remember working in the foundry at US Steel, and we would have to do what's called slag the cupola. And you would go up these stairs and you open this door, and when you look in there, it looks like a pool, a swimming pool of molten metal, and it was yellow. It was so hot that we had to wear these really heavy metallic-like suits because it would actually burn the skin if you did it. And that thing was heavy, and it was just so excruciatingly hot that we would do it early in the morning, and your body would feel the effects of that slag in the cupola, as they call it, for the rest of the day. It weakened you for the rest of the day. So I can almost visualize this protective clothing that he had to wear to prevent his skin from being burned. This individual worked for several hours and he collapsed and he died of heat stroke right there on the job. Now, lessons learned from this case. And one of them is that heat-related illness can occur even indoors. Again, it doesn't have to be as hot as it was, because again, the earlier case study that I talked about with the roofer, who on the third day on his job died, the temperatures were only 86 degrees that day. So it doesn't have to be this hot, and it can occur indoors as well. And the risk is not, they're not limited to outdoors. Some of the work and protective clothing that we wear are release of heat from the body. They prevent the release of heat from the body. Not only that, they don't allow air in to cool down your body. So a lot of those factor into these situations as well. And it's hard. Heat measurements underestimate the risk of heat-related illnesses in these situations. But it really does, I've worked indoors, I worked outside, and again, people can overheat in much cooler temperatures than what this individual was exposed to. And also, workers are more susceptible, it seems, or they run a higher risk of heat-related illness when they're reassigned from their regular duties. And that goes back to what we talked about earlier, where if you're not acclimated to heat, this guy was not used to working in this severe temperature, these higher temperatures. And so his body was not acclimated to that. And that is something that we have to take into account when we are on the job and when we're asked to go and work in another area and such. That's really important for us to understand that our bodies will give us warning signs, and we have to pay attention to it, because otherwise this can be deadly. That's going to conclude my portion of this, and I really do hope that you heard something here that you can identify with, that you learned some things that you possibly didn't know, and reinforce some of those that you already knew. And we want to make sure that you are better prepared to go out and protect yourselves on the job and your coworkers. Now I'm going to turn it over to Lauren. Lauren Booth, again, is staff attorney for A Better Balance. And she's going to help you better understand your rights under OSHA, the Department of Labor, and other enforcement agencies that can help you if you have any issues or if you feel like your rights have been violated, and they can help you navigate that. Lauren?
Thank you, Larry. Again, as Larry said, my name is Lauren Booth. I am a staff attorney with A Better Balance. We're a legal nonprofit advocacy organization. We use the power of the law to advance justice for workers so they can care for themselves and their loved ones without jeopardizing their economic security. We offer a free and confidential legal helpline. So we will be going over some laws that can protect you in the workplace, but if you have other questions or more specific situations that you'd like to talk to somebody about, please feel free to call us at 1-833-NEED-ABB. And I'll have the number again later in the presentation. Okay, so the next slide. Today we're just going to do a brief overview of some of the laws that we're going to talk about today. We're of course going to talk about OSHA, the Occupational Safety and Health Act that Charles has mentioned a couple times. We're going to talk about the ADA, Americans with Disabilities Act. We're going to talk about the Pregnancy Discrimination Act, the PDA, and we're going to talk about Family and Medical Leave Act, FMLA, as well as the enforcement agencies that would cover each of these laws. Let's start with OSHA. Okay, so the OSH Act the Occupational Safety and Health Act of 1970 is the federal law that was passed to prevent workers from being killed or seriously harmed at work. And this is also the same act that created OSHA that we know about, which is the Occupational Safety and Health Administration. So the OSHA Act covers most private sector employees, federal government employees, and some local government workers. So most people are covered. There are some exceptions, but again, I'm getting really into the details of it. And two key sections that I just want to pull out that we'll get into a little bit more are section 5A1, which it says that employers are responsible for providing a safe and healthy workplace free from recognized hazards likely to cause death or physical harm. And then section 11C, which says that firing or in any other way discriminating against an employee for engaging in various workplace safety and health activities is prohibited. Okay, let's move on to some of the details. So under the OSHA Act, you have a right to a safe and healthful workplace free of known dangers. But just because it has to be known dangers, it doesn't mean employers can hide their heads in the sands. This is what they should know about. They can't just say they didn't know. So, that's it. You have a right to training in a clear language that you understand about the hazards, methods to prevent harm, and the OSHA rules that apply to your workplace. You have a right to tools and equipment to do your job safely, including PPE, which we've all heard of thanks to COVID, but again, you've always had that right to be provided with personal protective equipment free of charge. You also have the right to receive information about hazardous chemicals that are in your workplace. Continuing on, under the OSHA Act, you also have the right to obtain and access safety incident reports, accident reports that your employer is required to keep. And then you also have the ability to file a complaint asking OSHA to inspect your workplace if you believe there's a serious hazard or that your employer is not following OSHA rules. Just stepping back a little bit about filing a complaint. So there's two types of complaints that you can file. One is a safety and health complaint, which is what I discussed, if you believe that there's a serious hazard or your employer is not following OSHA rules. To file that type of complaint, you can do that by calling your local OSHA office. You can call the national OSHA line number, the 1-800 number, which is 1-800-321-6742, and that's going to be on the later slide as well. You can show up in person at a local OSHA office. I suggest calling ahead to see what their times are. You can also file a complaint online. There's an online version of the health and safety complaint that's on the OSHA.gov website. And you can also complete and mail in a printed out OSHA complaint form that you can mail, fax, or email to OSHA. And if that doesn't work, you can also send a letter that describes exactly what your complaint is about, and somebody will reach out to you. Just tips as far as filing complaint. You want to file your complaint just as soon as you possibly can after noticing a hazard or the situation. You always want to. I have on here that the complaint can be anonymous, which is true, but a signed complaint is always more likely to result in an on-site inspection than an unsigned complaint. When you're filing a complaint, make sure you collect as much evidence as you can. Take photos or have documents that you have, and have everyone that's experiencing a problem, they can all file their own complaint. If OSHA just receives a complaint and they do order an inspection, it's best if you were participating in the OSHA inspection, and then also try to speak privately with the inspector once they're there. You also have a right to an employee representative, like a union safety steward or a workplace safety committee member, to accompany you on that inspection. And you also have a right to have someone file a complaint on your behalf. So maybe an authorized representative or an attorney or somebody else working as a representative or a member of a nonprofit group or such. So the second type of complaint is connected with this, my third bullet point here that says the OSH Act prohibits firing or in any other way discriminating against an employee for engaging in various workplace safety and health activities. So the second type of complaint you can file is called a whistleblower complaint. You can file it the same way I described above for the health and safety. There's an online form for it. You can mail it in. You could call and speak to somebody over the phone, try to go to a local office and file it. And those are complaints if you believe that your employer has retaliated against you, hiring, firing, etc., for exercising your rights as an employee under OSHA. So those are the two types of complaints. Okay, next, that was OSHA that we kind of wrapped up. Now, ADA, we're going to switch gears into types of laws that can assist you if you are or have been injured in the workplace, and then you need some sort of assistance or accommodations to continue doing your job. So first, we're going to start with ADA. It stands for the Americans with Disabilities Act. This law applies to employers with 15 or more employees, and it makes it illegal for employers to discriminate against workers with disabilities and requires an employer to provide reasonable accommodations. What we mean by that is minor job changes to employees with these qualifying medical conditions, unless it would impose an undue hardship on the business. Undue hardship means it would just be too expensive or too difficult for a business to accommodate you. But no matter what, if you're requesting a reasonable accommodation or a minor job change, you have to still be able to complete the basic duties of your jobs with those changes. So you still have to be able to complete your job duties. Okay. Next, we talked about first, qualifying conditions. So under the ADA, a disability is defined as a physical or mental impairment that substantially limits one or more major life activities. So examples that I've included here is performing manual tasks. So it limits your ability to maybe lift heavy items. You require assistance lifting. We have, limiting your seeing, hearing, eating, sleeping. Maybe you have blood sugar levels that alternate, so you need to keep them stable. So you need to be able to have a snack while you're working. We have walking, standing, lifting, bending, speaking, breathing. Example of that is like maybe severe asthma. Learning, reading, concentrating, thinking. Those could be conditions like ADHD or other conditions that make it difficult for you to and have trouble processing information. Also included under the ADA would include pregnancy-related disabilities. So common examples are like high blood pressure, which is preeclampsia, also referred to as that, gestational diabetes, the diabetes that develops during pregnancy, severe morning sickness, which can cause nausea and vomiting that's extremely serious, that can lead to weight loss and dehydration. So if you have those illnesses and disabilities due to pregnancy, that's also covered under the AAA. Not just being pregnant is not a disability. Okay, the next slide, kind of how you would go about requesting these job changes or accommodations, as we mentioned before. The first step is that you need to tell your employer that you need an adjustment for a reason related to a medical condition. Your employer can ask you to provide a healthcare provider note to confirm the disability, but that's not always needed or necessary. And the second step is that the employer must begin an interactive process of conversation to see if there are work options that can address your needs. It needs to be a two-way conversation. They cannot just simply ignore you if you've said, I have an underlying condition and that you need a minor change to your job. And although you might not be able to receive your first accommodation that you approach your employer with, your employer needs to provide you with an alternative, and they just can't force you to take unpaid leave if there's some other option that keeps you able to work. with a reasonable accommodation. Next, we're going to talk about the PDA, or the Pregnancy Discrimination Act. So I mentioned before that under the ADA, it covers pregnancy-related illnesses, so like gestational diabetes, etc. But it does not cover being pregnant itself. The PDA, though, is the federal law that prohibits the unfair treatment of workers because of their pregnancy, childbirth, or related medical conditions. So just being pregnant in itself, you're provided with protection. And this again applies to private employers with 15 or more employees, similar to the ADA. And it prevents an employer from discriminating an employee in any aspect of the terms and conditions of employment, and also harassment is included. You under the PDA, you can also receive minor job changes or accommodations. And on the next slide, I give a little bit of a breakdown of how this works as well. So again, PDA, it applies for employers with 15 or more employees, as I mentioned. And you do have a right to that reasonable accommodation, unless it would be a undue burden, which we had mentioned earlier, which is too expensive or too difficult for an employer to do. When it comes to pregnancy and related conditions, that does not include lactation. That is a separate issue that is not covered under the PDA. Just wanted to note that. And under the PDA, your employer must provide accommodations to you as under the PDA if they're providing accommodations to other employees to help them do their job. So if, for example, they're accommodating somebody who needs to sit down because they have a back issue, disability, as a pregnant worker, they need to also be able to accommodate you as a pregnant worker if you need to have some sort of accommodation to do your job. So it is a violation of the law, again, to offer those reasonable accommodations to somebody with a disability, but not offer that to a pregnant person. So moving into enforcement. So for the laws that I've just described, those would all be enforced through the EEOC, also the Equal Employment Opportunity Commission. This EEOC prohibits discrimination in any aspect of employment, so hiring, firing, promotions, layoffs, etc. And an employee has 180 days in Alabama. Others, it varies by state, so just double check that with EEOC after the discriminatory act occurred to file a charge. But it depends. Sometimes if it's a continuing pattern, they might have increased that time limit. With EEOC, you can file in person, by telephone, by mail, or online. And after you contact EEOC, an examiner will schedule an intake interview with you to discuss your concerns. So EEOC, they are tasked with enforcing and preventing discrimination against people based off age, disability, genetic information, national origin, pregnancy, as we've talked about, race, religion, sexual harassment. So they encompass all of those types of issues. And under the EEOC, when you're filing a complaint, you can also ask an individual or an organization or an agency to file on your behalf to protect your identity if you don't feel comfortable filing a complaint in your own name. Okay, so the next law, we're switching to a different law now, is the Family and Medical Leave Act. So this, again, we've talked about if you got injured on the job and you have a disability of some sort, you can get accommodation for that. FMLA is if you needed to leave your job for a certain reason, so you're unable to complete your work and you needed to take a leave. This is not a leave of absence or other types of policies that a private employer might offer or extend to you. This is under the government, and it has its own separate regulations, which I'll get into here. So under FMLA, you get up to 12 weeks of job protected unpaid leave per year. It can be used all at once or on a schedule to care for yourself or a family member's serious medical condition. And for family members, it includes like a spouse, a child, or a parent. And then FMLA has its own requirements. As an employee, you have to have worked 1,250 hours in the year prior to taking the leave. You need to have worked with the employer for at least 1 year, and you have to work with an employer with 50 or more employees within a 75-mile radius. And when it comes to FMLA, if you know in advance that you'll need an FMLA leave, you have to notify your employer 30 days in advance. Obviously, and most times this is an emergency situation. So you, in that case, you notify your employer as soon as you possibly can. Your employer cannot punish you in any way for taking or asking for FMLA leave. And generally, your employer must return you to the same or similar position after you've taken FMLA leave. Some exceptions apply. That's going into the particulars of your situation. You should always double check, as I mentioned, with your employer about their specific policies. Maybe you can take PTO, vacation, or sick leave. That's depending on what your employer's policies state. FMLA is, again, something completely separate. It is not a leave of absence and is not dependent on each employer's policy. This is a government set guidelines. There are other options if you don't qualify for FMLA, sometimes like workers' comp, unemployment. Again, those are outside of what I'm talking about today, but those are other things that you can look into if you find yourself in a situation where you cannot work. Okay, and then for the FMLA, that is enforced by the Federal Department of Labor. The Wage and Hour Division specifically enforces FMLA and other workplace laws. And they're committed to ensuring that workers are paid properly for all their hours worked, regardless of immigration statuses. That is not something that is taken into account there. And generally, you have up to 2 years to file a complaint, 3 years if it was willful, so they intentionally violated the law. There isn't a particular form to complete for FMLA violations, but again, you can contact DOL, visit their website, which will get you more information to how you can get in contact and speak with somebody. Just remember again that your employer cannot terminate you or discriminate against you for filing a complaint with DOL or participating in an investigation with DOL. Okay, so I know this has been a lot of information that we've just covered. And I just wanted to do like a quick little recap, like quick takeaway. OSHA, Occupational Safety and Health Administration, they're responsible for enforcing the OSH Act, which applies to most businesses, includes federal workers. There's some exceptions, again, for state and local government workers, but the majority of people are covered. If you have questions about conditions that are unsafe or hazardous, contact OSHA. Again, you can file a complaint, health and safety complaint. And if you've been retaliated against in any way, you can also file a whistleblower complaint. For OSHA, contact OSHA.gov or your state agency, which we have that information later on. Next is EEOC. So this is Equal Employment Opportunity Commission. This is the agency that is enforcing anti-discrimination laws like we talked about, which is the Americans with Disabilities Act and the Pregnancy Discrimination Act. This is the agency that would enforce it. And again, it would apply to businesses with 15 or more employees. And if you've been discriminated against or harassed in any way, you can contact the EEOC as far as filing a complaint, and they have their own process, again, either online, calling their number, and somebody will assist you in that way. And then finally, we have the federal DOL, which we talked about, is the agency that's enforcing the Family and Medical Leave, FMLA. They also do work with minimum wage and overtime, meal periods and break time, and nursing time for mothers. Again, they are depending on what issue you're talking about, is depending on time frame and how long you have to file a complaint if you do have an issue with one of these laws. So just next, we again have a lot of resources available for employees. On our next slide, we have again our, that one next, yes. On the next slide, we have our website, www.abetterbalance.org. Again, we mentioned our free and confidential legal helpline. So if I'm discussing laws and you have a specific situation that's come up and you'd like to talk to somebody about it, you can call us at 1-833-NEED-ABB. And then also on our website, we'll have Worker Rights Hub. You can click on and listed by your state. Here we just have a little snapshot of what the Alabama website kind of page looks like. And we kind of break it up onto different categories of what you're seeking help with. And it will give you a drop down the federal laws that protect you in those situations. That's all for me and my time. I'm going to pass it over to Charles, who's going to talk about some advocacy and other ways that you can get involved. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Lauren. Thank you, Larry, as well, for that useful information that you provided for today's webinar. Heat stress, or protection from heat-related illness. As we all found out today, that OSHA plays a big part in protections of these heat-related illnesses. Last fall, April 12th, OSHA initiated a process to create a federal heat standard. It's called the National Emphasis Program on Heat Illnesses and Injury. Through the program, OSHA will conduct heat-related workplace inspections before workers suffer completely preventable injuries, illnesses, or even worse, fatalities. They come out with a fact sheet on this National Emphasis Program. You can access the fact sheet on OSHA's website, and we will also upload the link to the fact sheet on our alabamaworkers.org website as well. At the same time, OSHA's presented a cool opportunity, which I think for workers to get involved with this process to create a federal heat standard. May 3rd, 2022, from 12 noon to 5 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. They're going to hold a discussion or a meeting, discussion over protecting workers from heat-related hazards. This is a chance that workers can get involved by registering on the website and getting involved with this meeting. I would encourage everyone to get involved if you don't have to work that day. Employment relationships. As we think about employee-employer relationships, two laws come to my mind: right to work and at will. I want to talk about at will just for a quick second. At will means an employer can terminate an employee at any time for any reason, except an illegal one, or for no reason at all without the employer incurring legal liability. And when it comes to being fired under at will rules, it gets really murky. There's a lot of details involved. When it comes to being fired under at will conditions, we can admit the advantage goes to the employer, but an employee can still be fired, can be wrongfully terminated. When you look at will laws, the definition can give any worker hesitancy to challenge poor working conditions. Workers do tend to forget that under safety, we do have whistleblower protections. Knowing your rights matter. If you feel your employer can do more to make your workplace safer for yourself and your coworkers, knowing your rights matter. When it comes to making your voice heard, knowing your rights matter. When you know that your rights have been violated, you can identify situations of discrimination and abuses of authority. Knowing your rights empowers you as a worker to stand up and make your work environment safe for yourself and your coworkers. Also gives you a direction in knowing what agency can support you as you challenge poor working conditions. And this is a reason why we give these webinars, to give you the power or the empowerment to use your voice to make your workplace for yourself better and for others. The OSH Act, or OSHA, as Cameron mentioned, the Americans with Disabilities Act, the Pregnancy Discrimination Act, the EEOC, the Department of Labor. These federal laws and agencies are in place for every worker in the United States. And it's very important to understand the coverages that each provides for us workers as we go about our daily work lives. Everyone deserves to return home the same way that they reported to work. Knowing your rights empowers you as a worker to use your voice to improve your working conditions if they do need improving. If you want to reach any of the presenters today for this webinar subject or to share your story, alabamaworkers.org website, you can register there and get in contact with us. Thank you very much. Larry, back to you.
Okay, thank you, Charles. Thank you, Charles, and thank you, Lauren. Again, Charles is the lead organizer that works with me on facilitating these trainings, and he's also, again, the lead organizer for Jobs to Move America. And Lauren is staff attorney from Better Balance, and I really do appreciate the valuable information that you both provided for us today. And then wrapping up, again, for more resources on your rights, you can visit alabamaworkers.org, and for Occupational Safety and Health Administration, OSHA, you can call 1-800-321-OSHA or 6742. But you can also log on to reach them at osha.gov. In the Birmingham area, there's an office for OSHA in the Medical Forum building at 950 22nd Street North, room 1050. And that phone number there is area code 205-731-1534. Mobile area, you can reach them at 1141 Montlemar Drive, Suite 1006. And that telephone number is going to be area code 251-441-6131. Also, the NLRB, or the National Labor Relations Board, that number is 844-762-NLRB. Or you can contact them online at www.nlrb.gov. And as Cameron mentioned earlier, the EEOC, or the Equal Employment Opportunity Commission, Birmingham's district office is going to be at Ridge Park Place, 1130 22nd Street South, or Suite 2000. You can reach them also on the telephone at 1-800-669-4000 or online at the EEOC.gov. Again, we hope that you have learned something today about how to better protect yourself on the job, especially in terms of heat stress and heat stroke, and also learn more about your rights to a safe workplace and how you can enforce those rights. And again, if you have any questions about how to request accommodations, if you're pregnant or have disability, paid or unpaid sick time or family leave, or your rights during COVID, you can contact the Better Balance. Jobs to Move America envisions a South with manufacturing jobs, good jobs that offer a good wage and benefits, and that companies commit to hiring goals for marginalized communities, including women, people of color, and people who face barriers to re-entering the workforce. Also, remember that Adelante Alabama Workers Center unites day laborers, domestic workers, and other low-wage and immigrant workers and their families in the Birmingham area to defend their rights, promote their dignity, and pursue justice for all. We'd like to thank you. And again, I'm Larry Hodge, Community Engagement Coordinator for Jobs to Move America. We appreciate your time. And remember, you can also go to alabamaworkers.org and view any of these past webinars, including this one. In a couple of days, I'll upload it there. But log on to the website. There's a lot of very, very good information and all of the website training that we've done so far. We also have a Facebook page. That Facebook page is JMA South, or Jobs to Move America South. And there's a lot of information there and information on current events and things that's going on, for instance, like the Amazon campaign and other things in the area. So please check us out. I want to thank you once more, and we'll see you the next time. Thank you. Somebody. That's it.